You might have had this experience before where everything in your life is going well, there's no more problems to solve, but for some reason you're still on high alert, you're still on edge and anxious. It's kind of like the fire alarm that keeps ringing even though there's no more smoke around. And this is kind of interesting because we would expect that when there's no more threat around, there's no more danger around, that in theory our anxiety should reduce, our fight or flight response, our physiological symptoms that prepare us for danger, like our heart racing, feeling on edge, feeling jittery, our breath getting more shallow, all of that should in theory reduce, but it doesn't. It's like our fight or flight response is constantly, perpetually in the on position. I'm a psychologist, and today I'm going to talk about some reasons for why this is happening, as well as some evidence-based strategies that I think can be useful for us to feel a little bit more safer and calmer in our bodies. So when people, as well as therapists, are applying strategies for this particular problem, they might be using some strategies like cognitive behavioral therapy, where we're changing both unhelpful behaviors as well as thoughts to be able to break out of an anxiety cycle, for example. However, in the case where there's nothing actually kind of going wrong in our lives, something like cognitive therapy, which aims to change thoughts, may not be particularly helpful because the person already knows that the problems have been solved or there's nothing really that scares them anymore. And as a result, trying to change their thoughts isn't going to be particularly useful if it's more of a body problem. So instead of talking about cognitive strategies, let's actually talk about some strategies that help to reduce physiological arousal. And many of the strategies that are potentially helpful are the ones that directly oppose the symptoms we notice when we're in a sort of a panic state, like when we're feeling on edge, when our breathing is shallow, when our heart is racing. What can be some useful tips that might be particularly helpful? So number one would be deep breathing, otherwise known as pace breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, where we're breathing in through our nose for a few counts, right into our belly or diaphragm, holding for a couple, and then breathing out through our mouth for a little bit longer than how long you breathe in. So in for 4 counts, let's say, hold for a couple, and then out for 6. And doing that a couple times throughout this practice to really be able to slow our breathing down, reduce the anxiety. So another strategy can be intense exercise. So even doing 20 push-ups or 30 seconds of jumping jacks or burpees or doing some sprinting, all of those things can be helpful to reduce some of the sort of physiological arousal by basically leveraging all that energy and putting it into something hopefully a little bit more productive. Besides exercise and breathing, another strategy that can be really helpful in the moment is the use of temperature. So even splashing your face with some cold water or using sort of a cold towel or an ice pack, putting that on your neck and your face, that can be really helpful to actually reduce a lot of the physiological symptoms of anxiety, especially temperature and heart rate. All of that can slow down a little bit. So alongside some of these more immediate strategies that you can pull for you to get out of the fight or flight response, another strategy that can be really helpful is something we call worry time. And one of the things that I suspect is perpetuating the anxiety that feels on edge, even when there's nothing immediately wrong, is that a person may still be constantly scanning their environment for threats. They're constantly worrying and thinking, did I do this right? Is that something I need to worry about in the future? So they're constantly scanning for threats in the environment. And one thing about worry time, what we do here is basically we take a circumscribed period of time, let's say 10 minutes after dinner, where we take out a notepad or a Word document and literally write down all the things you think you might be worried about during the day, or write down the things that you already did, as well as the solutions or the hypotheticals, basically anything that you want that is kind of your time to worry. And what we find is that this can be quite helpful so that by the end of the night, when you're noticing your brain's kind of going, oh, are the things that I should be worried about, you can already say, well, actually, I already wrote that all down. So really, there's truly nothing I need to be worried about right now, or even the things I do need to worry about, I already have a solution for, so I don't need to worry about it anymore. And hopefully your brain will go, okay, well, I mean, there's nothing left to do, so let's just go to sleep and let's just not worry about it anymore. A third strategy that can be quite helpful is the use of opposite action. And opposite action is basically a fancy term for doing the things opposite to how we might be feeling. So anxiety tells us to, avoid or pace around or to do a bunch of different things to kind of reassure ourselves. Whereas opposite action, basically it comes from the idea that how we act can actually influence how we feel. Like sometimes we might feel really, really low, but we end up taking a walk or socializing with friends, and we end up actually feeling better afterwards. Just the same when we think about anxiety, which tells us to avoid or get away from situations, doing a little bit of opposite action might actually be approaching situations that you would normally be a little bit anxious about, maybe going out for that walk, going to that cafe that you've never tried out before, or, reconnecting with an old friend, things that kind of allow your body and you to recognize that you're actually facing your fears, which can actually reduce anxiety. And along with worry time, another strategy that can be quite helpful is to actually vocalize your specific worries. So sometimes when we are worrying about something, it's quite nebulous. Like it's very unclear what exactly we're worried about. We just know that there's this presentation that we're worried about and we constantly think about the presentation. But one thing you can do is actually think to yourself out loud, what is it about the situation that I'm worried about? Maybe I'm worried about people's certain eye contact and kind of looking at you as if you were stupid, or you're worried if you fail this exam, you're never going to get into the job of your dreams or your vocation of your dreams. Whatever that is, be able to actually vocalize out loud clearly and specifically what is it that you're worried about. And sometimes that can be quite helpful to reduce the sort of gray, dark zone of all this nebulous worrying and actually give you a clear action plan as to okay, this is what I'm worried about, so this is what I'm going to do about it. And of course, it's also helpful to be mindful of the lifestyle factors that can contribute to stress. Like, for example, are you eating well enough? Are you exercising? Are you making sure you're not drinking too much caffeine? All those things can, of course, impact how you feel on day to day, especially things like caffeine. And of course, being able to make sure that you're having some time every day to actually just slow down, enjoy the sun, maybe drink a cup of tea instead of coffee, and be able to step away from the hectic pace of the world itself, the stress of the world itself, especially with everything going on, so that you're able to take a couple quiet moments to yourself and hopefully reset your nervous system. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I encourage you to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.